From athletes to authors, entertainers to innovators, we connect with those who help shape our culture. Join us in revealing stories of their lives and backgrounds, their triumphs and tragedies that molded them into who they are today. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating, this is Audibles with Jason Scarborough.
This week on Audibles, John Currence.
So you were born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. So how would you describe your childhood growing up?
Degenerate, I guess.
Why degenerate?
No, I'm kidding. I had a sort of a crashingly sort of dull childhood. In that, I grew up, in New Orleans during the Civil Rights era. I was born in '64, and so, I remember, the town, a city that, was untouched by, for the most part, by civil rights. New Orleans is such a checkerboard that, we all lived amongst one another. It was literally like a checkerboard. You could go from, one block to the next, and it would, go from sort of a white neighborhood to a black neighborhood, and so, childhood was sort of unremarkable. I grew up in uptown New Orleans in a little neighborhood that was sort of strangely Brooklyn-esque in that, that was the first big supermarket, the Winn-Dixie, planted a half block away from my house, and we had a McKenzie's bakery and a bank, and there was a neighborhood bar and a couple of dress stores and salon and dry cleaners, all a liquor store. These things are sort of all bunched up together in this 2-block area. And so, there was just a lot of coming and going in our neighborhood. I grew up in a time when, we stayed out and played in the neighborhood running around, until, the street lights came on and Mom screamed at us to come home. And so it was a more innocent time, but at the same time, I was coming of age in the early '70s as the draft in Vietnam was in full swing, and so I remember watching Walter Cronkite sort of list off the numbers killed for the day, the draft numbers coming up, and being able to do math at the time and listening to stories about Vietnam, a conflict that had raged for 20-something years, when I was 9 years old, and and then thinking, well, I'm eligible for the draft when I'm 18. This war's been going on for 20-something years. I'm just 9 years away. I could get drafted, and so I sort of lived with that. There was turmoil socially in that I was born just after Kennedy was shot. Nixon was president, so we had Watergate, but it was still a time of certain innocence, and so I love that. I loved growing up in New Orleans. It was it was a very sort of fragrant and rich upbringing. That just so much of my young life was about. It was about food. It was about hunting and fishing. It was about spending time with family and friends. And our neighborhood friends are still our friends to this day. 50-something years later. It's interesting. For me now as a father of a 9-year-old, to just see how different it is. And I'm sure that my dad looked at his childhood the same way that I'm looking at at mine, and what the sort of hurdles are the obstacles that my daughter will have to climb over as she continues to grow up. New Orleans was a magnificent place to grow up because there was so much exposure to everything. God, we started drinking when we were like 13 or 14 years old and smoking cigarettes when we were 10 or 11, and it was we used to ride our bikes all the way downtown from uptown near Tulane University. It's 6 or 7 miles, where we just take off and go, a pack of kids, and our parents didn't worry about where we were going, and I can't imagine my daughter in a couple of years just going off and disappearing for half a day and not being at the police station demanding some sort of attention and finding out where my daughter is, and knowing that something terrible was wrong. So I loved it. I wouldn't trade growing up in New Orleans for anything in the world, but at the same time, I wouldn't trade being able to raise my daughter in Oxford for anything in the world, for the sake of my selfish psychosis.
Now, what's unique about your childhood is because of your dad's job, you got to spend some time in Europe when you were growing up. So how would you describe that time in your life? You speak so eloquently about New Orleans. How would you frame the time that you got to spend in Europe with your family because of your dad's occupation?
Well, a couple of things. I'd say, and sort of what I was waxing nostalgic for, the world being a different place, in the States then. It was also, a different place in the UK. So we lived in Edinburgh for about 2.5 years. And my dad was in oil and gas, and so he was sort of instructed to pick up his family at 36 years old and move, a third of the way around the world. Which I remember when I turned 36 thinking, about that. And I was like, I could have no sooner moved around the corner at 36 with the family than move a third of the way around the world. But, my mother was a history teacher when I was young. And so she taught high school history. And my parents were extraordinarily wise. And so, they knew that when we moved over there, I was 9 and my brother was 7. And so what they knew would benefit us, was taking us out of school every chance they got, to travel to the mainland. And so my dad was doing business in Norway, was doing business in the Netherlands, Germany, Egypt, India. And so regularly, they would tack on a weekend to my dad's business trip, pluck us out of school, and we'd go to Rotterdam or Den Haag and spend the weekend in the Netherlands. And then my father would have business, and my mom would take off in a car with us, and we'd drive to Belgium and drive through the countryside. And this is before there's a giant highway system in Europe. And you have to think too, this is, just a quarter of a century. This is 25 years, 30 years after the World War II has ended. And so the countryside was still visibly scarred from the war. I mean, very visibly scarred. And when you drive through an area where there's been a tornado, for 30, 40 years, you can still see the path of where the tornado went. It wasn't, surprising or shocking at all after seeing it a few times that, just be driving down a country road and la-da-da-da-da, and then there's an armored personnel carrier in the middle of a field rusting. It had clearly broken down or bogged down in the mud and just been abandoned and left there, and it was the shell of it was still sitting there. A tank would be, a regular sight to see the shell of a tank, just sitting on the edge of a road. And at that time, they were still finding tons of ordnance, we would, as we traveled, we would hit these Saturday, just sort of flea markets, and I can't tell you how many times that I would go to a flea market and there would be table after table after table after table of folks that had World War II memorabilia for sale. I mean. Nazi uniforms, infantry uniforms, bayonets, ceremonial daggers, Lugers. I mean, you could buy a Luger anywhere, And all this stuff, buttons, badges, medals, like all of this stuff, was just everywhere, and that's how close we were to it. And my parents knew that, I'm sort of focusing on the war, but actually traveling Western Europe and seeing, that place where they knew that, we would study the history of as we grew up. To actually have seen it and visited it, would much better inform what it was that we were learning. So that if, when we started learning about Roman history, to have actually been there and stood, in the ruins of ancient Rome, and walked by the Colosseum, like it just, it much better, filled that palette with color for us. And so it was a magnificent opportunity. And what was further to that then was, then we had to eat while we traveled. And, so, to go to Rome, and go into a trattoria and, and actually see, a true Italian carbonara, and taste that, in a restaurant in Rome, to eat veal blanchette in a brasserie in Paris. I remember the first time in Belgium to have French fries and mayonnaise together. In fresh cut French fries. It may have been the first time I ate, or that I remember eating fresh cut and cooked French fries, for sale in a public place. I had them at Fish Fries in New Orleans, but my mom never cooked fresh cut French fries. But to go to this vendor that's selling these perfectly crispy on the outside and fluffy on the inside French fries and homemade mayonnaise, and just at first thinking, oh, this is bizarre. Like, who eats mayonnaise on their dog? That's the most incredible thing I've ever tasted in my life. So to actually see those things and taste those things in the place of their origin, again, that was not that I ever had any thought of becoming a chef, but in retrospect, like, that was informing, my interest and understanding of food, that would come, a decade and, a decade later. An unbelievable opportunity. And so it's, that so much so that, when I talk to young folks all the time, sort of about, what's the most important thing about, I'm always like, travel. Take every chance that you have to travel. Go see other places than, where you grew up in and went to college, or, don't just go to Grand Teton and, and have a summer out west. Like, go to Europe, travel, get lost. And that's of course it's much more widely available now to folks, and much easier to do. But I can't say how deeply all of that formed me as a human. And as a citizen of the world, and understanding and seeing how other people live and how much less people need in their lives to be satisfied. I went 30 years ago, had a chance to go to Cuba. So I broke the law. Went to Cuba and to just see how significant community is to people when they have so little, and how little it takes to truly make people happy. I think that's the worst thing about traveling is I come home, with this, this incredible guilt at, just the excess that, that we live with, even, in the leanest of times, we're just throwing stuff away, quicker than we can buy it, it seems like. So
don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders,
gotta have the ability to get their product to market,
infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
So I'm curious the experience moving back to America. You guys specifically moving back to the Carolinas. I mean, were you ready to come back to the States? What was that transition like for you when you guys came back?
Well, it was probably a little more of a challenge for me than it was my brother. So my brother would have been, just finishing 4th grade. I was finishing 6th grade and starting 7th grade. And so the greatest challenge for us was to fully lose an accent that we had curated very quickly, in Scotland, so that we could, that we would fit in and not stand out. I mean, we were indiscernible from any other Scottish kid, our age. And I was coming home to, before we moved to Scotland, we went to school where my mom taught, and so we moved. Well, I moved once. My brother just started school and went through his first first few years at this one school. And the school that I started in was, for lack of a better description, it was an academy school in New Orleans. So it was a school that was set up by a man from outside of New Orleans. I think he was from Lumberton. It was called Sam Barth, and it was very much set up to avoid integration.
Okay.
And it was also, for the course of its existence, was the football powerhouse. I mean, as in grammar school, we had gym 3 times a day. If you got crossways with another student, they encouraged you to fight. But it was controlled. They put these gigantic boxing gloves on you, and before your gym class, they would circle everyone up and they'd let you go at it until somebody said uncle, and then you had to take off the gloves and shake hands. And and the 3 guys that I ended up having a fight with were my best friends in the world. I mean, we were like the 4 inseparable buddies. And anyway. When we came back to New Orleans, my mom had decided not to teach anymore, and my dad had done well enough that they had the means to put us into Newman. And so here we go, getting plugged in. This is gonna be my first time going to school with girls ever, and it was in 7th grade, which is an unbelievably awkward time, as everybody probably remembers. And and here I am still trying to shed a Scottish accent. I had been in school uniform for the last 2 years, and so my mom had to go out and shop for us. And at that time, that was the summer that Star Wars came out. Mm-hmm. Disco was exploding, and so it was not a particularly good time for fashion. And my mom she didn't know any better, and so she drug us out to JCPenney's, and I got dressed up in the Fox collection, and where they had pants and shirts that you just matched the numbers on them, and they created an outfit. And so I showed up at Newman my very first day in these gigantic bell-bottom corduroys, and I remember it was this knit shirt that had varying width stripes that were orange and brown and white and really bad versions of those colors, and and probably some kind of Huggy Bear hat. And I went strolling into school and in my moccasins and bell bottoms, and and I'm walking into a little Brooks Brothers ad, with all these kids. It could not have been more preppy, and peg leg, Madras pants, and polo shirts, and I could not have been more out of place. And so that's how I started my first day at Newman, and it was brutal. I recovered, but I love that my parents were dead set. They're like, we will help you fit in a little bit better, but we're not going to go to deck you out in 25 Lacoste shirts and all this stuff. Like you're just gonna wear clothes and suck it up, and so I did. And I was I wasn't my parents were not from New Orleans, and so I was not part of the blue blood the blue bloods, and so we didn't belong to clubs and country clubs and that sort of stuff. And my dad was very busy, and so he did not participate in a lot of the social stuff of the Mardi Gras organizations and men's clubs. And so it was an interesting time because I liked everybody, and this was a school that they'd already developed their cliques. There were the kids that were the athletes and the nerds and the kids in the drama club, and then the kids that just didn't fit in anywhere. And I liked everybody, but you weren't supposed to go and move between. You were supposed to find your group, mm-hmm. And so. I just never really found that, all the way through high school. And so most of my friends were from outside high school. I just kind of went, whichever way the wind blew. And as a result, I had a strange time in high school. It was not, it was neither bad nor good. I just remember, sort of as I was graduating and my granddad being in town, and I got a rejection letter from Clemson, and it was heartbreaking. I wanted to go to Clemson, and I remember him cuffing me on the on the back of the neck. He said, "Son, just enjoy this time." He said, "You need to enjoy every bit of this that you can, because this is as good as it gets. These are the salad days." And I just remember him walking away and just going, "God, if high school is as good as it gets, I mean, this sucks." And unfortunately, that was not as good as it got. And I went on, and it baked in a lot of good for me. Because it was very clear that I was not gonna, I wasn't just gonna compromise what I believed in, to fit in with a certain group of people. Mm-hmm. And that's always served me well, is to be true to myself. But yeah, I unfortunately I didn't pay attention the way that I should have in high school. I did not take advantage of the of my opportunity at Newman. In spite of that, I mean, it still prepared me unbelievably for college. I do in retrospect. That's the one thing. If I could change anything about my life, I wouldn't change a thing, except that that I had been more attentive to learning when I had the opportunity to stay in school.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
We hope you're enjoying Audibles with Jason Scarborough. Watch every full, unedited episode via our digital platforms. Download our free Roku TV channel simply by searching for Audibles on your Roku device. Look us up on our YouTube channel too under Spirit Media Network and hit subscribe. And enjoy episodes of Audibles along with our other original content. Bookmark our website at spiritmedianet.com and stay up to date on what's happening on the Spirit Media Network, where we're changing the game.
going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders,
Got to have the ability to get their product to market.
infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
So you spent some time in college. You went to college in the Carolinas, and you worked at Bill Neal's Crook's Corner restaurant. But you also spent some time on a tugboat in the Gulf of Mexico in the oil fields. So which one was cooler? Which one had a bigger impact on you? I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of the Gulf on a tugboat, but then working as a dishwasher and moving your way up at Bill Neal's restaurant. Which one had a bigger impact on you?
Well, I'm a firm believer that you take away from everything you do. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's both. The job on the tugboat came the morning after I graduated from high school, and I was thrown into that. I was the low man on the totem pole. The tugboat captain said, "Congratulations, son. You're the cook," and long and short of it, he gave me a copy of The Joy of Cooking and told me that he'd teach me how to make a pot of coffee and a pot of rice, and as long as I did both of those well, that I would decrease the risk of ending up at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and that everything else was an afterthought. You're cooking for a bunch of Cajuns, and so when the groceries come in, he said, "I'll order the groceries. When groceries come in, if we got chicken, on the back of the book, and you find a recipe for chicken, that you like, and do your best to make that, and you put it on the rice, and off you go." And so I remember the very first thing that I cooked was smothered chicken, and I had some piece chicken that came in, and seasoned it and seared it, and made the gravy and onions, and I didn't burn the rice, and everybody was happy. And so every morning I got up and I made rice and cooked bacon or sausage, and then fried eggs, and these guys ate fried eggs over rice with hot sauce, and that was what they ate for breakfast every day. And then made sandwiches for lunch, and then cooked dinner, as well as what I was getting paid to do, what my job description said I was going to do. And so that was, I worked in a galley kitchen, wasn't a hell of a lot bigger than this table, and so everything was within arm's reach, and it was very tidy, and so that when you got out in the Gulf and the boat's rocking, that everything is locked away. So it was very, very secure and tidy, and so I enjoyed that. It was there that I really saw, because I'm extraordinarily impatient, the immediate gratification you get from putting a plate of food in front of someone, them taking a bite, and immediately gauging their response to it, and I love that. The Crook's job, I picked up a job actually as a busboy, and I didn't have, let's just say, the requisite people skills to work in the dining room, and so I was relegated to the dish pit. And because I have so much nervous energy as a youngster that I couldn't sit still, and so whenever there wasn't anything to do, there was a prep table right behind me that I was working, butt to butt with a prep cook, and so I'd just turn around and pick up a knife, and if he was cutting green onions, I'd go to cutting green onions, and if he was taking corn off the cob, I'd just pick up a cob and start taking, and so Bill saw my interest and saw that I was always asking questions, and that there was I know the day that I caught his eye was because there was one of the two stoves on the line was just filthy, and I had nothing to do, and so I just started. I also I used to take everything apart when I was a kid. I wanted to see how it worked, and so I immediately started dismantling the stove and cleaning all the pieces of it, and and I know that really was just the thing hadn't been taken apart in years. It hadn't been cleaned in forever, and so, I was soaking all the stuff in degreaser and scrubbing it and cleaning it, and so I got promoted into a prep cook, and then, quickly he brought me on as sort of his kitchen manager assistant, and took me under his wing. He just saw my interest and how much I loved it and how I responded to things, and loved learning, and so he really took me under his wing, and so that was he was my first mentor, and so to have somebody with that much knowledge, and who was that respected and feared, to take a liking to you and want to share with you what they know, I wish that I had recognized years earlier when I was in school that teachers were just doing the same thing, but I always thrived when I was doing something with my hands, and so this is an opportunity to learn, while working with my hands, and so so both of those experiences were great, but it was it was working side by side with Bill that and growing up in that kitchen that I knew like then and there. It's like, well, no matter where I go in the world, I can do this, or I can get a job doing this. Now I know how to hold a knife. Now I know how to cut things. Now I know what, the basic terms mean. And so that was exciting. And then on top of that, it just, it fit a derelict's life. There was fire and knives and, lots of late night nefarious activity and booze and drugs and women and, what's not to like. So it checked all the boxes for me at 20 years old. So there it was. I had fallen in love with the restaurant business in that kitchen.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders,
Gotta have the ability to get their product to market,
infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
So you're at Crooks Restaurant for a while, and then you've got a high school friend that comes to you and says, hey, come be my sous chef back in Louisiana. So you get a chance to move back, Louisiana, home state. Was it a difficult decision to move back to Louisiana at that time?
No. Going home was a pretty easy decision, and part of it was because I living in Chapel Hill, Chapel Hill 35 years ago, was a sort of a quintessential college town, and there was lots to keep folks hanging around Chapel Hill. There was a huge arts community. There was a really big music scene going on, and so you had lots of folks that just clung to town. And I watched a number of them, who had clearly been there for 10, 15 years, and they were just sort of floated from job to job to job. And it seemed like the longer they stayed, the harder baked that umbilical cord, got. And, so there was this part of me that, that realized, as I was 23, I guess, man, if I don't make a move and do something at some point, I could wake up, at 40 something and find myself still here and doing the same thing. And so when the opportunity came along to go home, it was a very quick and easy decision to make, because I could break the umbilical cord. I could go to New Orleans, and at that time I thought, I could go on and finish my degree, and and then go into business school or law school or whatever the hell I could get into at that time, and and find the grown-up thing that I was supposed to do. But the exact opposite happened. I got home to New Orleans. We got Gautreau's open, and Gautreau's, we got our 5-star rating faster than any restaurant had ever gotten it. I want to say it was within like 5 weeks. We had, Gene Bouré was the restaurant critic for the Times-Picayune at the time, and he'd been in, made his 5 visits, loved the restaurant, gave us 5 stars, and and we were off to the races. And it was extraordinarily exciting, because that was a different variety of restaurant competition in New Orleans. This was serious. This was professional. Kitchen crews were like gangs, and and this is at that time, each kitchen crew had their own bar for after work. And you didn't go on somebody else's turf or there was going to be a fight kind of thing. And so, you knew the guys from Commanders, hung out at the Rendezvous. Some other, the guys from the upper line went to Les Bon Temps Roulés. We went to Cooter Brown's. Now we were a small crew. Gautreau's. There were 3 of us that worked in the kitchen. One of them was our chef who didn't drink, and so that left 2 of us as the gang. So we didn't need to get in any fights. But it was incredibly exhilarating, and and we lived that restaurant. We worked 6 days a week, 3 of us in the kitchen. When we first opened, there was no dishwasher, there was no pastry cook. There were just 3 of us, and we came in every morning, and we did all of the saucier work. We made all the stocks, we did all the desserts, did all the station prep, and then got set up for service, and then worked service. And as soon as service was over, then chef would leave and go sit down in the dining room to sort of do paperwork and go over the night's events, and the other cook and I cleaned the entire kitchen from stem to stern. And then we'd go sit down with chef after we were done with that and go through each ticket one by one. And we'd turn them over so that we start at the beginning again and go through each one and what had gone right and what had gone wrong on each ticket. And it was like going through, like game films. And, what can we do better? What do we need to change? What's right about this plate? What's wrong about this plate? Do we need to change the garnish? That sort of thing. And, and we would finally wrap up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and probably too many drinks in, and go home, sleep it off, and be back at the restaurant at 9 o'clock the next morning to do it all over again. And that's just how we lived. And I left when he offered me my job when I was in Chapel Hill. I got my W-2s together because I was working about 3 different jobs, and I had made $11,500 in the year prior, and so he offered me $13,500 to move home and to go to work for him. And so it was about 6 months in when I finally went back to, counted up the number of hours that I was actually working during the week and divided that into what I was making, and realized I was working for like $1.78 an hour or something. But I didn't care. I didn't care. I was learning so much, and I was so deeply in love with what I was doing. It was never for a second about money. But yeah, and Larkin Selman, who was my chef, and is still a friend, was one of the greatest inspirations that I've ever had. And the only thing that I think is the world never really got to see what his food would become before he left Gautreau's, and he ended up catering, and so his food never went on. He was in the very first class of the best new chefs that Food and Wine started recognizing in 1990 or 1991, but he left soon after that, and so we never got to see what his food was truly like. So, but he was amazing.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders,
Got to have the ability to get their product to market.
infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
Hello, I'm Gary Jolly from the Tractor Store in Richland. Now's the best time of the year to save more with Mahindra, and it all starts with zero. Pay zero down and 0% interest up to 60 months. That's more for less on many of Mahindra's best-selling models, with tractors that deliver more lift, capacity, fuel efficiency, and built-in weight. So get zero down, 0% interest for up to 60 months on Mahindra, the world's #1 selling tractor, Mahindra, available at the Tractor Store in Richland.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
So eventually you leave Louisiana and you decide to venture out on your own. Were you nervous? Were you anxious about saying, all right, I'm going to venture out on my own? And you didn't just venture out on your own, you end up here in Oxford. I'll get to why Oxford in a moment, but were you nervous when you decided to venture out on your own?
Now, I think that coming to Oxford, I knew that I didn't have to lean way too far out in front of my skis in order to be successful. I didn't know enough about the restaurant business to have any business going into it on my own, but to come to Oxford in 1992 when there wasn't really anything else going on, and that folks were clearly hungry for something, that if I did a really good roasted chicken and made some good crab cakes and had a filet and bordelaise with some good roasted garlic mashed potatoes, a piece of salmon, that was cooked well, that people would be happy, and they were, it didn't hurt not having any competition at all. I mean, not having any competition for 25 years, for the most part, didn't hurt. But, that gave me, I would say a confidence that, sort of between knowing that it was a pretty safe bet, and the fact that it wasn't gonna, I didn't have anything at risk. I mean, we opened City Grocery, I think for, it was like $32,000 or $35,000. I mean, it was just unheard of. It was, that money seemed like a king's ransom back then, but I knew that even then, I could work that off if 17.5 of that ended up on my plate, and we failed miserably. I was like, I can pay that back. So, those things, gave me the sort of the confidence that I needed to jump off. And plus, I wanted to do it. I wanted to, to have. I'd opened restaurants before, but opening my first one myself, was something I really wanted to get under my belt. So.
And it was 92 when City Grocery opened. Everybody's got an opening night story when they open a restaurant. Do you have an opening night story that you can share with us?
It wasn't particularly chaotic. I couldn't tell you what day of the week that we opened on, which is sort of surprising. But no, it wasn't until we got to our first graduation that we had one of those nights where all the wheels came off, and that was one where all the plumbing backed up. And I mean, and the restaurants, the restrooms in that building sit between the dining room and the kitchen, and so all of a sudden the toilets are backing up and water's going in the kitchen and water's going out into the dining room. And and so there I am between cooking pans of shrimp and grits with plungers, trying to get toilets unclogged, and and I had a magnificent plumber at the time that showed up, and we were pulling the toilets up off the floor to run a snake down, and it was insane. And then the exact same thing happened the next graduation Friday. I mean, it literally happened 2 years in a row, to the point where I was convinced that there was something in the way of sabotage going on somewhere. But no, while there are lots of stories in that building. It was not an opening night story that I could tell that I remember we had it easy.
Did you ever think, now that we look at that building down the road here, we're sitting here at Bouré, your beautiful restaurant here on the square, did you ever envision that City Grocery would, certainly you had goals, but did you ever envision it would turn into what it did?
I just don't think in those terms. For me, life is about getting through the day, making sure that everybody that helps, get that place from, cutting the lights on to cutting them off is taken care of. And, accolades aren't anything that I ever focus on. It's not the thing that we work for. And so, that's always been when good things happen, they happen, and good things happen because we try our hardest to be the best that we can be at what we do every day. And, and if you do that well enough and take care of your people, at some point, somebody's going to give you an attaboy. And so, that's, I've always just sort of felt like, I want to stay on the ride as long as I can, and, do what we can to the best of our ability. And, when it comes time to cut the lights off, then we'll know that it's time to cut the lights off. But until then, we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders,
Gotta have the ability to get their product to market,
infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
So things are moving along for you really, really well with City Grocery. And since that time, you've opened several other restaurants. Going back to the talk about the Carolinas, being on the Tugboat, traveling Europe, was there ever a time that the light went off, hey, I'm going to be a restaurateur? Or even when you set out with City Grocery, did you have the intention to open other restaurants down the road, or were you content with City Grocery at the time and these opportunities just presented themselves to you as you progressed?
The decision to open additional restaurants was entirely built on our talent pool. And so in 92, there were a lot of people, folks were getting interested in the restaurant business. It was becoming, sort of an acceptable alternative as a career. And it fit the lifestyle of a lot of folks, like me, enjoyed. And so we quickly gathered a lot of people who were extremely talented and were management caliber folks. And so, by late 1993, we're a year and a half in and busting at the seams with folks that, I know if we don't do something else, we stand to lose those guys to someone else, or them going to open their own places. Like all the guys that opened Proud Larry's had worked for me, and they'd gone on, and we supported those guys when they went on. And so Randy Yates, who was our bartender at the time and an extraordinarily dear friend that owns Ajax now, he and I were traveling to Atlanta pretty regularly, and we'd fallen in love with this burrito joint in Atlanta and decided we wanted to do a college town burrito joint. So we opened a place called Nacho Mama's. And then, he had worked everywhere in Jackson that there was to work, and had turned me on to Kiefer's. And so, we decided if we did something like Kiefer's in Oxford, that would kill it. And so we just shamelessly ripped off their menu and put a little New Orleans into it and opened up a place called Kalo's. And it was, it went gangbusters, but it was all predicated on us needing to put people somewhere so that they didn't, go off and to, compete with us, or, to go on somewhere else, because there was nothing else for them to do. And so that's been the history all along. And, and you could look at the timeline of the different restaurants that we've opened over the year, and you could see in the times when we were lean with talent and when we were thick with it. And, we haven't done anything in the last few years because, hiring, folks are gnashing their teeth over it now, post-pandemic, but this was going on for a couple of years prior too. Anyway, that being said, we're blowing through opening Big Bad Breakfasts everywhere else. So we're still managing to find people, but we have always been, and that's what, the growth of Big Bad Breakfast is we're building those stores based on the people that we find in the markets that we're going into. We're not going to find real estate. We're finding people and finding talent to open those stores with.
How many locations are you guys up to now, Big Bad Breakfast?
11 as of today.
As of today.
Yeah, and we have 9 in the works for the rest of this year.
9 additional. Wow. Did you ever envision Big Bad Breakfast turning into what it has, where it's multiple states that you're overseeing these restaurants now?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The morning that we opened Big Bad Breakfast, there was just this. It was this tornado of chaos. We're waiting for the health inspector to come and sign off on our final inspection. We're trying to get all this stuff put away and the work site cleaned up. And my wife walked up to me because I was just standing in the middle of the dining room and there's people just racing around me. And she goes, "What are you doing?" You're like staring off into space, mouth breathing. And I said, "This is the thing that's going to put us on the map." And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "You watch. This is the thing that's going to put us on the map." She goes, "But I mean, you've been running this place for 20 years, and you've been written up everywhere, and you've been nominated for Beard Awards, blah 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 blah." And I said, "But this is the place. You watch me," because nobody else had done it. I knew that people were going to respond to it. Now, I didn't at that time know that we would, that we might open 50 of them, or anything like that. I just knew that it was the thing that people were going to really respond to, or that was the thing that people were really going to respond to. And so I didn't know how we were going to catapult it forward. I certainly never dreamed that we would have a year where we opened 10 stores. But it's very real now. And the fun part is that, it has taken me away from the kitchen completely, but in the last 5 years, I've basically had to, start at first grade again and learning about an industry, or learning a piece of an industry that, I thought, 5 years ago I would have told you, yeah, I know everything about this that there is to know. And learning multi-unit operation and all of the complications that come along with it, which, are myriad. It's 1,000 times more, complex than anything that I've ever done before. It's an absolute ball just to have the opportunity to go through that exhilarating learning curve again. It's unbelievable. And to see that we can scale what we're doing from a quality standpoint into multiple stores and not have to sacrifice the vision that we have just because we're scaling. We can maintain a quality of product and a quality of service across multiple stores that that I would have thought 10 years ago. It's like it's not a thing, and it is a thing, and it's something that I'm extremely proud of, and I'm having a lot of fun with. But I mean, it requires diligence like nothing that I have ever dreamed of before.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders,
Gotta have the ability to get their product to market,
infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
So out of all the restaurants, all the recipes that you have spent countless hours developing, thinking over, looking off into space, mouth breathing, right? Thinking about, I had to use that line. So what's your favorite item to eat at each of your restaurants? Do you have a favorite?
I don't. I live, my life is just a series of cravings. And so, if you could talk to my wife, she would tell you that, I get obsessive about really weird things, sort of on the leading edge of COVID. I think for 6 months I cooked chicken pot pie just over and over and over and over and over again, and every one of them was different. And, every one of them was about, trying to get to the next level of flavor, but at the same time, circle back to, those flavors that I remember, my grandmother's chicken pot pie tasting like, or my mom's chicken pot pie, and and how do I find those things? And so, I really, I go from craving to craving, and depending on, what I'm feeling like is where you'll sort of find my interest. But here it's actually we had two things that were on the original menu at Bouré that have left the menu, and I hope to bring back in a hurry. Our Reuben, which was a staple on the opening menu, and it was one of the reasons that we opened. There wasn't anywhere in town to get a Reuben, and I was craving a Reuben. When I moved to Oxford in '92, there was a way before its time vegetarian co-op grocery store and cafe right next door to City Grocery called The Harvest, and The Harvest made this magnificent mushroom melt, which is just sautéed mushrooms and onions and Worcestershire and soy that they served on toasted wheat bread and Swiss. So it was like a grilled cheese with mushrooms and Swiss cheese and mayonnaise, and it was phenomenal. And that was, we got the blessing of the owners. It had been closed for a decade but when we opened the original Bouré, and they blessed us, putting that on the menu. And so that was here forever. And that's another one that I've been craving lately. But we've got a fried shrimp po' boy on the menu that my partner and I both grew up eating at Domalice's, and we wanted to go back and recreate the shrimp po' boy from Domalice's that we had growing up. And that's one of my favorite things here. At the grocery, that menu has been changing for 30 years, with the exception of shrimp and grits and the Caesar salad and the house salad. And so, just depending on what is at the chef's whim and whimsy over there is what you'll find. At Snackbar, Vish's Indian fried chicken sandwich is just one of the sickest things that I've ever eaten in my whole life. And then at Big Bad Breakfast, there's a thing we call the breakfast crumble, which I love that we've sort of glorified. It was the thing that when I'd go through in the mornings to do quality check on the line, when we first opened, I'd grab a styrofoam cup and a biscuit and just crush the biscuit in my hand and drop it into the cup, and put tomato gravy and bacon or sausage and a couple of poached eggs and some green onions on it, and just basically eat it with a spoon out of the styrofoam cup. And that became a dish on the menu. Even though I wanted to serve it in the styrofoam cup for the full experience, but I was told that was probably not in our best interest. So that is my go-to, because that was my breakfast meal for forever.
So what are you craving now? Well, is there a concept coming that you can tell us about, or?
Yeah, we're working on a couple of things. I mean, we have been for the past several years working on a po' boy and gumbo shop concept that my partners and I will open the first one of those in Nashville in the next couple of months, and that's basically going to give me. Crawfish etouffee was another one that had about a year, where every chance I had. My wife is so sick of crawfish etouffee. To literally like to say it, she just kind of like the bile rises in her throat when you utter the words now. But it gives me, the opportunity to cook those things that I, absolutely adore, so that we can have a slate of about 8 or 10 po' boys, and then some etouffee and some boudin and a couple of different gumbos, and it's just going to be. And when I really want it to be a super simple, just kind of dive shop, like I remember growing up with, because they're just disappearing. And then we've got a pizza deal that we're working on. I don't by any means think that going forward, Domino's and Papa John's have crowded the field so hard and changed the landscape for what pizza is. I mean, the idea of going out and eating pizza is so alien to people now, versus like the pizzerias that we grew up with, the mom and pop joints that we grew up with. Pizza it's a thing that comes to your door now. But I can't get deck oven pizza out of my head. It's the wood burning pizza has become so vogue now. Everybody's forgotten about an old school deck oven, and deck oven pizzas is what everybody cooked on for so freaking long. And it's like, why is anybody doing that anymore? So we've got a deck oven idea that we want to work on.
I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing how that comes to fruition. Yeah. So when you're not opening a restaurant or not writing a book, you've written a handful of books. I mean, you stay insanely busy. What do you like at home? What do you do just to wind down, relax, if that's even a good word? What do you do?
Well, I cook now.
Yeah,
right. I mean, that's where I get to do it, and it's magnificently humbling. I've got a 9-year-old. who would, basically tell me where I could stick that beard award, because she doesn't really care for much of anything that I cook unless it's one of those mac and cheese cups that I peel the top off of and put some water in and toss it in the microwave. But no, I cook. I play tennis. My business partner here and I bought this magnificent little clay court tennis club here in town about 1.5 years ago, and so I play tennis in spite of how it might look, and then I go to South Louisiana and fish whenever I can, and then I get out and shoot ducks, whenever I get the opportunity. I like to bird hunt, and now that I'm spending some time with the guys down at Mossy Oak, I'm getting leaned on to come down and learn how to turkey hunt. And I'm terrified that could become the vice that I've been told for the last 30 years of my life that I needed, that I don't have. So I'm trying to stay out of it, because I've told all of them, this is the wrong guys to tell, I've told all of them, I was like, oh, I don't have anything warm to hunt. I mean, anything for warm weather to hunt in, right? And it's like, that's always been my thing. It's like all my hunting gear is for cold weather. And I have a feeling that they might be able to come up with some warm weather hunting gear down in West Point.
So if I text you here in say a year and ask if you've taken up turkey hunting, what's going to be your answer? What do you think the answer is going to be?
Well, there's also an incredible gun store down in West Point, and all I'd say is, I hope that I've taken up turkey hunting and not collecting Purdy shotguns, to the tune of $50,000 a pop or something crazy like that.
I'll come into one of your restaurants and see one of the guns over the bar mounted, or something like that. So I saw an interview that you did with CBS, their early morning show. It's from a few years back. You just lost your mom, and you said that you would love to have one last meal with her. And I thought that was an interesting thing, and you talked about the impact that she had on you. What would that meal be if you could have one more meal with Mom?
Well, we kind of did. She was in town for the Southern Foodways Alliance fall symposium before she had her fall. And the Sunday of SFA, the chefs who come to cook sort of typically gravitate to my house and gather, and we'll cook red beans and rice, or or just vegetables or something, in the afternoon as they're sort of all drifting towards the airport, and watch football. And that particular Sunday, I had the craving for seafood gumbo, and seafood gumbo has been one that, in my mind, it's the most challenging gumbo to make, and I've never really nailed it the way that I wanted to. And so my mom and I got over the pot, and we cooked a pot of seafood gumbo, sort of the middle part of the day, and there were probably 20 people at the house, and when it was done, and we served it up. And it was one of those moments where everybody got in the kitchen and had a bowl and a spoon in their hands, and it got dead silent. And I was like, that's it. Like, that's the one I've been waiting for my whole life. I finally, that's the recipe I've been looking for, and it was perfect. And, and so we sort of hugged over that bowl of gumbo, and I, cleaned out the pot, and I had 3 or 4 quarts of it to put away in the freezer, and I put it away, and of course, then Mom went on and had her fall, and then passed away, and so those 3 or 4 quarts were in the freezer, and every once in a while I'd go and pull one out, and and let it thaw and warm it up, and and have folks to come eat, and I was like, there's a little bit of my mom in that in that gumbo every time we thaw one and eat it, and so. I also was lucky that as my dad sold our house or sold their house, and as we were going through Mom's stuff in the back of a closet full of office supplies, I found she had stuffed her card file, my one of my grandmother's card files, my great-grandmother's recipe card file, and a great aunt. So I have all 4 of those. And so for the past 3 years, I've been cooking from those card files. And so, you know, I have that little piece of all of them. And like to have those cards with each individual's handwriting on it, you know, it's really touching. And it's, you know, every time, you know, I pull one of them out and, you know, go through and it's like, what do I want to cook? You know, it's like having them, you know, here with me again for a second.
Can't imagine what she would think about all that you've accomplished even since then, with Big Bad Breakfast continuing to explode. You've got all these other concepts going on, and it's clear to see her legacy live on, your parents' legacy live on in you. What do you want John Currence's legacy to be years from now? How do you want to be remembered, your legacy?
Well, I want my daughter to miss me, you know, when I'm gone, you know. But I don't really, you know. I get asked that every once in a while, or something like that, and I don't really think in those terms, you know. I hope that I leave, you know, the world in as good a place as I could find it. That, you know, that I've touched people's lives. In a way that you know, people that I work with every day, that I've given them the opportunity to have a better quality of life. You know, there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction, and you know, a lot of the people that were here 30 years ago, you know, are still around, and you know, I've seen them, you know, graduate from college, start their families, have their kids grow up and start college and finish college. You know, we've got second generation coming through the restaurants now, you know, working for us. You know, so I feel like I'm seeing a sort of a full circle of life, and you know, if I've helped, you know, make Oxford, you know, a little bit better a place, you know, than it might have been otherwise, then, you know, then I'm happy. But, you know, I'm not really worried about legacy. I mean, I tell folks all the time that, you know, they want to know how far I want to go with Big Bad Breakfast, and I said, I mean, I'm looking at that as, you know, as my retirement plan, so that when the day comes and somebody hands me a check to just get lost, then I'm going to get lost, and what happens from that point forward, like, I don't care. I want to be able to put my feet up and travel with my family, and be able to relax, and you know, and enjoy whatever bit of life that I have left, you know, comfortably, and with my family. But you know, I do hope that I've done some good for my community, and you know, and that community being, you know, the folks that have, you know, given us the ability to open the doors every morning and lock them up at night, and you know, the place where I hang my hat, you know, all of the, you know, I do a lot of work and advocacy for, you know, for folks that don't have a voice, minorities, for the LGBT community, and you know, if I've helped be a voice, you know, for those folks that you know, have helped us make a living, you know, then I'm happy that, you know, that if I can be remembered for that.
I know the town of Oxford and the state of Mississippi and the South, and me personally, I appreciate what you've done for the city of Oxford, and I appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us. Thank you for doing this.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.